Tariffs. It's when our government sends a tax bill to a foreign government and they just pay it. It's so simple. Why did we ever stop doing it? It's free money.
The tariffs.
The Chinese government pays the tariff.
No, they don't.
Yes, they do. The government that is manufacturing that product, I just want it to be even. And
Oh, see, that's the thing Trump's talking about. If we tax them, hit tariffs, the same item they're making over there will cost the same to make over here.
We pay the tariffs.
Well, the companies pay the tariffs, not us.
China doesn't pay the tariffs. We do when they come in.
No, it doesn't work like that.
But if you really think about it for more than 5 seconds, you realize that that's insane. Why would another country agree to pay it if they get nothing in return? And if we send China a tax bill, wouldn't they just laugh at us and send it right back? Does the IRS even have jurisdiction over a foreign government? Well, there's an outrageous number of people who seem to believe that this is how tariffs actually work. So allow me to put my degree in international business to use and explain how tariffs really work, how they have backfired on us in the past, and maybe we could all understand how the current tariff plan against China, Canada, and Mexico might actually play out. So, imagine Walmart sells a toaster made in China for $50 and an American-made toaster for $100. Now, the typical Walmart shopper will probably pick the cheaper one, and the American-made toaster will just sit there unsold. The American manufacturer will have to slow down production after all their inventory piles up, and then that's when the layoffs start to happen. So in this case, the government would place a $50 tariff on the Chinese toasters to help the American toaster manufacturers, and now they both cost $100. And then you hope that the American consumer will pick the American-made toaster. Walmart would pay the tariff up front when they import the toasters from China, and if they import 1 million of them, then Walmart would pay $50 million in tariffs to the government. So what that also means is China doesn't pay anything. But to shoppers, all you will notice is that the $50 toasters are gone, and maybe you can't even afford that, so you end up not buying either of them. And now Walmart is stuck with all this extra inventory and an enormous tax bill, while the American toaster company's sales still remain low, and maybe they go out of business anyways, and American consumers just see prices go up. So that's the thing about tariffs. If people make their buying choices based on price, and you raise the price, they might just choose to go without a toaster. The American manufacturers in the exact same position they were in before the tariff went into effect, and consumers just see that prices are going up. Maybe they didn't even look at the manufacturer label on the box, and they just decide that I can't afford either of these toasters, so I'm just gonna go without a toaster. And what if there's a toaster made in Vietnam for $60 and one made in the Philippines for $72 or Bangladesh for $65? And what if a Chinese company owns all of these factories in Vietnam, the Philippines, and Bangladesh? Then the Chinese company is just gonna make money either way. Prices go up for the American consumer, and American manufacturers will suffer either way. So in that situation, a tariff wouldn't make sense because it's globalized. There's too many manufacturers from many different countries. If you tariff one country, you're really just giving a leg up to the next cheapest country. So what is a situation where a tariff can actually be a good idea? If there's a mature American industry, either manufacturing, farming, mining, whatever, and that company has had a slowdown in production because a new, cheaper foreign competitor is taking business away from them, you would put up a tariff against that foreign competitor, and if you're lucky, their sales go down, then they will just give up trying to enter our market altogether and then just go back to where they came from. So it's 1969. Honda dropped the CB750 onto US shores, and it was a very well engineered, reliable, and most importantly, affordable motorcycle. So Honda and other Japanese manufacturers who made similar models started taking market share away from Harley-Davidson. Also in '69, Harley was purchased by AMF, a bowling alley manufacturer who had no idea how to run a motorcycle company. They cut costs all over the place, and Harleys were plagued with reliability issues and stagnant design, and all of this led to very poor sales. So AMF Harley started to panic. As the Reagan administration came in, they asked him to raise a tariff against Japanese motorcycles taking their market share. So in 1982, Uncle Ronnie raised a 45% tariff that took effect against Japanese motorcycle manufacturers with engine sizes larger than 700 cc's. These tariffs took direct aim at the CB750 and other similar Japanese bikes like it, and the Japanese companies packed their bags and went home and were never heard from again. So what happened? This is the exact sort of situation where a tariff should work, right? A specific American manufacturer facing off against a new foreign competitor from a specific country, and they raised the tariff at the right time, right as they were gaining market share. Did they even help at all, or did they make things worse? Spoiler alert, they made things worse. Japanese manufacturers figured out that if their motorcycles are going to cost more, they'll simply make their product better for the lowest possible cost, so it'll actually be worth a higher price. Honda took the basic Goldwing and added a bunch of luxurious features and pushed out marketing to get American buyers to see it as some kind of comfortable long distance cruiser. And this created an entirely new genre of big, comfortable bikes for dorks and nerds. Kawasaki took their basic Z1 and added race bike, aerodynamics, racing parts, brake upgrades, chassis, suspension upgrades, and that bike was known as the Ninja. So in 1984, when this bike was ready and they released it, it created a whole new genre of sport bikes, basically race bikes for the street. And when Tom Cruise rode the Ninja in Top Gun, it was over. Everybody wanted this bike. Yamaha took a different route. They took their Virago 750 and just detuned the engine so it measured at 699 cc's, so it came in right under the tariff limit. They were allowed to sell this bike and dodge the tariff entirely and keep on selling it for a lower price. But that's not it. The fear of tariffs inspired Japanese auto manufacturers to upgrade their cars in the same way. So Honda, again, created Acura as a sporty sub-brand of the Honda brand. So basically, they turned the Honda Civic into an Acura Integra, giving it a slightly better engine, better suspension and handling, but otherwise it's pretty much the same car. But they were able to sell it for a lot more. Toyota created Lexus as a luxury brand specifically designed to appeal to American buyers. And Nissan created Infiniti to sell cars to real estate agents and registered nurses. It's like a deluxe Maxima, basically. So all these brands ended up taking an enormous chunk of market share from American luxury brands like Cadillac, Buick, and Lincoln, and they've never been able to recover from it. So after the tariffs, Japanese motorcycle manufacturers continued to take enormous amounts of market share away from Harley and created two entire new genres of motorcycles that are still popular to this day, and Japanese auto manufacturers took market share too. And they never really lost ground since then. These Japanese auto manufacturers did end up setting up American manufacturing plants, or they made deals with American manufacturers to kind of share platforms. That's how we got the DSM and the Mitsubishi Eclipse, which is really sick. I should probably bring that back. These plants are good, Setting up more plants in America is good for American workers, but a lot of these foreign-owned plants are not unionized, so the people working in these plants don't have as good pay or benefits as the factory workers working for American manufacturers like Ford and GM and Stellantis. I think they're called Stellantis still. Despite all this, Harley did manage to survive, but ironically, they did it by doing the same thing that Japanese manufacturers did. They made a better product that people actually wanted to buy. It just so happened that in 1981, just as the tariffs were about to hit, a group of investors bought Harley off of AMF. They were spearheaded by Willie G. Davidson, and if his name didn't make it obvious, Willie G. was a descendant of one of the founders, so he actually cared about the company. He wasn't just some Nepo hire though, he actually worked for Harley as a lead designer throughout the AMF years, giving us the iconic Superglide and Lowrider, which, remained a model in their lineup for several decades, and the Lowrider ST is probably the sickest bike they have on sale right now. What that means is he actually knew about the business, he knew how to work as an employee in the company, which made him uniquely capable of leading the company. So after Willie G took over, he helped develop the Softail, which is still in production. I have one, I love it. He also developed the more modern Evo motor to replace the unreliable Ironhead motor of the AMF years. They released the FXR, which is the best bike they ever made. They improved manufacturing practices and modernized inventory management, all kinds of boring business stuff, but they made those changes in the business side, and all of that resulted in better bikes that Americans actually wanted to buy again. And they actually started when you press the start button, something the AMF Harleys didn't really do all the time. By the way, Harley, if you are listening, please bring back the FXR, like a modernized version of it, maybe with that new RevMax motor that's in the Pan America and the Sportster and the Nightster. Just like a FXR, kind of a classic looking frame with that triangle in there. If you brought that back, I'd sell my Street Bob right now and I would buy it. I swear to God, that thing would be sick. Buell is basically doing that with their Super Cruiser. People really like it. Harley can do the same thing with an actual FXR name attached to it, and people will buy it. But yeah, it's not that complicated. If you make a product that people like, they will buy it. American manufacturing jobs are saved without any tariff needed. But that's only true if people can actually afford the product. The fact is, a lot of American jobs are being lost because American companies are choosing to send jobs overseas. They don't have to do this. Trade doesn't force their hand. This is a choice they are making. So when you see corporate types pushing for tariffs and claiming it'll protect American jobs, I just don't believe it. In the end, the working class people who have to buy these products are just being punished with higher prices. And it's all because of the shitty choices that corporate CEOs are making by sending these jobs overseas in the first place. So what about the tariffs against Canada, Mexico, and China? Is that going to save American jobs? No, it's a terrible idea. Remember how I said you need to target tariffs against a specific, cheaper foreign competitor to boost a faltering American industry? It's got to be very focused. Well, the current tariff plan isn't focused at all. Putting a tariff on all imports from China and all imports from Canada and all imports from Mexico is the dumbest shit I ever heard. Those three countries account for close to 40% of our total trade. If we raise these tariffs, we're just making things more expensive for no reason, and worse, we're hurting American manufacturing jobs more than anything else. Just look at the American auto industry. American factories use engines and transmissions made in Mexico and stamped steel body parts from Canada. So if the cost of those parts goes up, then the cost of cars manufactured in America goes up. So these parts imported from Canada and Mexico are either made under license from those American companies under contract, or maybe these factories are partly owned by American companies. So they basically have nowhere else to go to get these parts. They have contracts to abide by, outlining, a requirement to order X amount of parts over a certain amount of time. Some of these facilities are wholly owned by these American companies. So if the tariff raises the cost of engines, transmissions, and body parts, then the cost of American manufactured vehicles goes up. And we can't just turn around and start making those things here. You just cut off the supply of these parts for whatever reason. We decide we're just going to not buy these parts from Canada and Mexico. That means the American factory shuts down. You can't sell a car without a body or an engine or a transmission. So if the companies want to try to bring that manufacturing capacity back to US, they're going to have to take floor space and workers from the assembly side that's been optimized for final assembly using these parts from Canada and Mexico. And now they're going to have to devote some floor space to stamping and engine casting and machining and manufacturing. So now you're able to make less cars in the same space. So even if you go that route, every individual automobile will cost more to make, simply because you can't make as many as you used to. So they can go and set up devoted stamping and, engine transmission manufacturing in the US, but how long does that take? Months? Maybe even years? And what happens if they go through all that trouble and then the tariffs go away? Then all of that time and energy trying to research and build these new manufacturing plants in the US was an enormous waste of time. And this is just the auto industry. There are some raw materials that simply don't exist in the US, or these raw materials are at such limited quantities that if we lose these foreign sources of these raw materials, we're kind of stuck paying these higher prices, and we have no American version that we can turn to. Rubber trees don't grow in the US. So what are we going to do if rubber imports are tariffed? We're going to just have to suck it up and pay more for everything made of rubber. And what if rubber producing countries get sick of us and put a trade embargo on us as a result of all these tariffs? Companies that use rubber to make products, they close down. They can't make their product anymore. Natural rubber goes into all sorts of materials and products. So these companies that rely on rubber imports will close down. The workers get laid off. We have nowhere else to turn. You can't sell cars without tires. Firestone can't make tires without these rubber exports coming into them, and rubber trees don't grow in New Jersey, so we're just out of luck. Think about all the industries affected by that if we can't make tires anymore. We just have to buy tires from overseas. Anything that requires a van or a truck, people need tires for their car so they can get to work. Airplanes have tires. Just a simple loss of rubber exports to the US could have disastrous consequences. So rubber is just one example. There are a lot of critical material imports that are simply unavailable or extremely limited within our borders. So if we tariff countries who we buy them from, then American manufacturers will have to just raise prices. Ultimately, the consumer is going to pay for those tariffs. And all of this is for no reason. If there's no goal, if there's no specific industry we're trying to protect here, then it's just a waste of time. So a broad tariff against specific countries, every import coming from those countries will cause sales to suffer. The economy will slow. Workers will get laid off. The economy will slow even more. Factories will shut down. The economy implodes. And we did it all to ourselves. So imagine all the imported raw materials from our three largest trade partners suddenly going up in price, and all the companies in the country feeling the same type of shock all at the same time, and all sorts of companies dealing with unexpected consequences all at the same time, and it's all self-inflicted. And then think of the retaliation tariffs, which will slow our industries and our exports. These tariffs can truly trigger an economic apocalypse. Trillions of dollars of value wiped out over the course of a few short months. The loss of key, imported raw materials isn't a hypothetical scenario. In 1973, the US went through extreme economic turmoil due to the trade embargo of oil. Oil-producing countries limited all exports to the US and a few other countries for their involvement with Israel. The embargo caused a recession that lasted until 1975. It kicked off a period of stagflation that effectively ended US economic growth, going all the way back to World War II, and the unemployment rate stayed above 6% all the way until 1987, from losing one key imported raw material. Now think about these tariffs affecting dozens of different imported raw materials, dozens of different imported products and goods and services that may or may not even have an American version that we can fall back on. And we already know that foreign trade partners are already planning retaliatory tariffs. But if they become motivated to enact trade embargoes, especially on key raw materials, things can get real ugly real fast. So we're not going to raise money from China by putting a tariff on them. That's not even how it works. China isn't going to pay a single cent, or Canada or Mexico. We pay. The consumer pays. We pay higher prices, then we're going to have to pick and choose what we can buy. Businesses will fail. Manufacturing can shut down. It can cause a domino effect that will echo for years, maybe even decades. Raising money from China by placing a tariff on them is like pulling your own teeth out to raise money from the tooth fairy. It only makes sense if you have no idea where the money even comes from in the first place. Someone needs to tell them the tooth fairy isn't real. It doesn't work that way. Putting a tariff on an entire country's imports is insane. Putting a tariff on three of our largest trading partners at the same time is economically suicidal. People seem to think that outsourcing jobs is a consequence of trade, and that is simply not true. Trade is a good thing. It allows us to buy fruits and vegetables out of season. It allows us to access raw materials that are simply unavailable in the US. And it allows us to focus on things we're good at so we can sell them to other countries that don't have what we have. Outsourcing jobs is not good. Sending jobs overseas is a bad thing. But again, that's not a requirement for trade. That's a decision that greedy companies make, and nobody is forcing them to do it. But ever since the 80s, when corporate greed became acceptable, these greedy corporations have been obsessed with boosting profits as quickly as possible, and outsourcing jobs and offshoring our manufacturing is the quickest and easiest way to do that. It's all about making the number on the spreadsheet look a little bit better every quarter so their shareholders will be happy. China wasn't making products and forcing them on us. American businesses moved our production over to China so they can boost their profits. And that's why I think these tariffs aren't even actually an attempt to save American jobs. It's a nefarious plot to boost profits at the expense of working class Americans. And let me tell you how they do it. The US imports a lot of lumber from Canada. If we put a 25% tariff on Canadian goods, that means the cost of this lumber goes up. And the theory is people will choose the cheaper American lumber and everyone is happy, right? American lumber producers get more business. But now, greedy losers who own shares in these American lumber companies can get away with raising US lumber prices by up to 24%, and they'll still be the cheaper option, right? The US loggers who grow and harvest the lumber will just get paid the same. We will pay more for houses and furniture and other things made of wood. And the shareholders who don't contribute in any way to the process of producing lumber get to stuff their pockets with the additional profits. The tariff essentially allows them to raise prices for no reason and get away with it. A 25% tariff on foreign goods gives American corporations an excuse to raise prices up to 24% and still be a little bit cheaper. And that extra 24% is pure profit for them. But we, the consumer, have no choice but to pay these higher prices, whether it comes from Canada or the US. And this isn't a hypothetical. Again, this really happened. They just pulled a scam just like that a few years ago. In 2019 and 2020, Trump pressured the Federal Reserve Bank to enact quantitative easing measures. So quantitative easing, or QE, is when the Federal Reserve Bank prints a whole bunch of money out of thin air. They just print money and they proactively pay out bond obligations. So people, you know how bonds work, right? People buy bonds and then there's an interest rate and then they cash them out a few years later, right? So a lot of bonds are held by foreign governments, primarily China and Japan. So basically in 2019 and 2020, in the beginning, like right as COVID was hitting, Trump pushed the Federal Reserve Bank to print $1 trillion. I'm not exaggerating. It was actually $1 trillion, and send it out to anybody holding bonds. So again, a lot of that money went to China and Japan for free, for nothing. The extra money supply drove inflation up from 2% to 9%. But when the Inflation Recovery Act brought real inflation back down to about 3% in the end of 2022, prices stayed high because greedy corporations had an excuse to keep them high. We got used to paying more and they just pretended inflation was still high. And it shows in their profit reports. They're not hiding this. Their profits throughout COVID were insane because they lied to us. They ran this same exact scam again. Remember when car prices went up because of a chip shortage? Well, there was never a chip shortage. Automakers anticipated a dip in auto sales due to COVID and canceled a lot of chip orders. Then, when it became obvious that the demand wasn't going to drop, they all scrambled to reorder the chips, but chip makers were busy filling other people's orders, so they were at the back of the line. So instead of saying, sorry for the shortages, we made a bad call, we assumed something that didn't happen, they just lied and called it a chip shortage, and then jacked up prices to take advantage of the problem that their own poor decision making created. And this isn't the only time. Remember when egg prices shot up about 2 years ago? They lied to us about that too. They were blaming avian flu back then, even though it hadn't affected chicken populations at that time. They just jacked up prices and pocketed the extra profits. They had 2 entire years to prepare for avian flu, and instead, they just pretended it was already here and drove up prices. And you see now what it really looks like when avian flu affects chickens. There's actual shortages. There's millions of dead birds. For 2 years, they just pretended avian flu was here And now that we actually have it, you can see what the world looks like with the avian flu affecting chickens. So that's basically how the scam works. They pick an excuse to raise prices. Sometimes it's actually happening. Sometimes it's just a story and they just raise prices and increase profits. And sometimes if it's a real thing that caused prices to go up, it eventually goes away and they just pretend that problem is still around. Same thing happened again with gas prices. The Russian invasion of Ukraine caused a price shock when Russian oil was restricted all over the world. Foreign countries weren't buying Russian oil, so there's less oil supply in the global market. So prices naturally went up. But the US government issued oil companies more drilling permits than ever before, allowing them to drill on public lands. But the oil companies just sat on the permits and refused to drill. And this kept oil prices high artificially. It didn't need to be that high. And that high price meant more profits for the oil companies. And the worst thing is they take these oil permits and put them in their asset side of their, spreadsheets and say, hey, look, we have all these assets. All this hypothetical oil that we could be pulling out of the ground is worth a lot of money. They're not actually pulling it out of the ground. They're not even selling it. They're just saying all this oil they could be selling is worth a lot of money, which I guess is technically true, but it's also, fraudulent and illegal. Why aren't they drilling the oil? They're in the oil drilling business. What's stopping them other than greed? In my opinion, these tariffs are not meant to save American jobs or American manufacturing. They are the next attempt at running back this same old scam that they've run at least 4 times in the recent past. First, they'll raise the tariffs and prices will go up. Then they'll quietly drop the tariffs little by little, and corporations will illegally collude to keep those prices high to boost their profits. Then they'll flood the media with disinformation and make us think that those high prices were someone else's fault or out of their control, when it is completely within their control. And it's so frustrating seeing all this, knowing how tariffs work and how economics works, and seeing the scam play out in plain sight, and then hearing people who don't know how tariffs work believing that it's gonna, we're gonna take money from China, like they're just gonna pay us. And that's the whole reason I made this video, so people can understand the way things actually work and they just don't believe the hype and they don't get scammed anymore, because I'm getting scammed along with you. The more people know, the less they can get away with it. So what did we learn today? Tariffs are an outdated idea that rarely work as intended. They make things more expensive for working class Americans, and they give rich weirdos an excuse to artificially raise prices and increase their profits. Some tariffs in the past had crazy outcomes, like the Smoot-Hawley tariff in 1930, which basically kicked off the Great Depression. There was stock crash in 29. They thought tariffs will help. They enacted the tariff, and the entire next decade was an economic disaster. There was also the chicken tax tariff of 1964. It made it so Americans don't get to buy sick-ass foreign-made light trucks like these and like this and this. And the Trump tariffs will most likely implode the entire economy and destroy American manufacturing in the process, because those previous disastrous tariffs were kind of focused. These new tariffs will affect nearly 40% of all imports. There is no way anyone can anticipate how this is going to play out. This can have effects you can't even imagine. This might cause a domino effect of just chaos that nobody can understand and prepare for. What you need to know is that the Wall Street shareholder class never cared about American jobs. They're just trying to run the same scam they've already pulled on us at least 4 times in the recent past. But we can stop them by understanding what they're doing and calling them out for their lies as they're lying to us. So I'm going to cover more economic topics and try to help more working class people understand how things really work, because the corporate disinformation has fried a lot of your critical thinking skills. Not to sound rude, but a lot of you sound really dumb, and I don't want people to be so dumb, because it's very expensive. It's expensive for all of us. We are cooked as a society if you don't understand these economic concepts, and if you just repeat the nonsense you hear in the corporate-owned media, you're helping them out. So please share this with your friends. subscribe, hit the bell, the normal YouTube stuff. Let's get together again in the future so we can talk about corporations or, how do those work? What is private equity? How does inflation work? Kind of mentioned it earlier. So in the meantime, I'll assign you some homework. How about you look up the chicken tax, how that played out? Basically, Germany and France put up a tariff on cheap American chicken exports. So in retaliation, we put a tariff on light trucks made overseas. Even though Europe put the tariff on us, we put up a tariff on light trucks coming from anywhere. So what ended up happening? Foreign manufacturers started building trucks in the US, which is good. Again, American jobs and all that. They're not union jobs, but better than nothing. But that's basically why we can buy a Toyota Tacoma in the US, but we can't buy a Toyota Hilux. We can't buy Land Cruiser Prados. We can't buy this $10,000 Toyota truck. But the funny thing is, Ford and GM also build light trucks overseas that they can't sell here. So American companies building light trucks overseas can't sell it to the American people. GM makes these Australian Ute El Camino sort of things with big V8s, and they look really cool, and I think Americans would buy these, but we can't because they're made in Australia. There's one insane thing that came out of it. Ford had to go through insane lengths to sell the Transit Connect here because they were built in Turkey at a Ford factory, but since they counted as a light truck, Ford had to outfit each Transit Connect with a full interior, ship it to the US so it can qualify as a passenger vehicle and, skip the tariffs. Then when it got here, Ford would take the interior back out, send it back to Turkey so it can be reinstalled in another Ford Transit Connect coming here. It's an enormous waste of time. It's dumb. Tariffs are dumb. Don't be dumb. Don't support these tariffs. Thank you. Come back again. We'll talk about something else. Maybe put something in the comments with, what we should talk about next. All right. Well, before you go, I guess it was announced that steel and aluminum imported to the US is going to be tariffed at 25%. So what does that mean? On one hand, it's a little bit closer to the way you're actually supposed to enact a tariff. You pick a specific industry and tariff the industry, and instead of just tariff every good imported from a country. But is it good? Is it better? It's hard to say. So let's look at the facts. Nearly half of all aluminum used in the US is imported. So will American aluminum production be able to make up this, basically double their production? How long will that take? In the meantime, what does that mean for the cost of aluminum goods? How will this affect airplane manufacturing? We know that they're in a pretty weird place right now. Airplanes use up a lot of aluminum. How will this affect beverages? Will this cause Arizona iced tea to finally have to cost more than 99 cents? If they do that, I think there will be riots in the streets, if you ask me. So again, we'll see how this plays out. Is American-made aluminum more than 25% more expensive than foreign aluminum? Because if it's like 40% more, well, I guess we can look this up. If it does cost more than 25% more than foreign aluminum, then people are still going to choose the foreign imported aluminum because it's still the cheaper choice. Is American-made aluminum just as good or better? Or are there foreign aluminum manufacturers that have proprietary alloys that we don't have access to? Are these special alloys required for certain types of products and manufacturing? Will American manufacturers be able to mimic these alloys? We'll find out, right? Same thing with steel. Steel, about a quarter of the steel we use is imported. A little bit easier to kind of make up that difference. But again, is American-made steel more than 25% more expensive than foreign steel? We'll be in the same situation. Again, a lot of questions, right? We don't know how this will affect things. Nobody knows. That's the thing about tariffs. And one last thing that kind of gives insight. I uncovered this interview from Trump going way back into the 80s where he basically endorsed tariffs on foreign steel, and he was very excited about it. Check it out.
Guest, the famed developer Donald Trump of New York.
Back then, Trump's target was Japan and its trade practices.
The fact is that you don't have free trade. We think of it as free trade, but you right now don't have free trade. Let Japan come in and dump everything right into our markets and everything. It's not free trade. If you ever go to Japan right now and try to sell something, forget about it, Oprah. Just forget about it. It's almost impossible.
They are ripping us like we've never been ripped before. If you look at Japan, if you look at China, where we lose $100 billion a year with China.
He's been saying the same thing for 30 years.
So is this what this is all about? Like, is Trump just obsessed with tariffs going back 40 years and he's just had a hard on for tariffs this entire time? Like, is that the amount of thought he put into this? He's just been wanting to do tariffs this whole time and he just will not give up. He just, you know, like, is this it? Is that the amount of thought that, like, has nobody told him how tariffs actually work? Like, you're gonna throw the entire US and potentially global economy into complete chaos just because he's like a tariff enthusiast? Is that what's going on? Because if so, I don't know what to tell you. We're in for a wild couple of months. So with that being said, thank you. Tune in again in the future. We'll talk about something else real boring, and hopefully I can make it exciting for you. All right. Thank you. Good luck. The next few months are going to be a learning experience for all of us.